Good afternoon all and good morning. I would want to welcome you and thank you for joining us on today's hands-on lab. I'm Goce Mirchevsky. I'm leading the SnapLogic department at InterWorks. I have been part of InterWorks for 13 years and have been working in integration ever since. With me I have Vladimir, one of my technical leads and with extensive experience in SnapLogic and data warehouse as well. From SnapLogic side, we have Michael Nixon. Michael recently joined the SnapLogic as a vice president of product marketing, and he will lead the outbound product marketing and adoption efforts. Prior to SnapLogic, Michael was with the cloud data company Snowflake for almost 4 years. Before we start off, I just want to go with one housekeeping item. We have opened a pool questions, and it would be great if you could spend a minute or two to quickly answer them, so we can introduce with you better. I'm going to hand over to Michael now to get things started. Michael.
Great. Thank you, Goce. I am going to share my screen, so just bear with me for a second or two. All right, here we go. Good day, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Goce, for the introduction. I want to go ahead and dive into our presentation here. And so let me kick things off by saying a lot of us have a few things in common. I mean, what every enterprise wants, we all want to deliver products and services to market faster. We want to provide exceptional customer experiences, and we want to deliver results, amazing business results. That's what motivates each of us every day to do the fantastic work that we're doing. And to accomplish that, many of you in your enterprises, you're adopting a cloud architecture. Let's say perhaps you're embarking on digital transformation. The issue, or I should say the challenge with the digital transformation, is that it provides you a lot of great capabilities in terms of faster execution, better agility, and ability to respond to business conditions a little more rapidly. But on the downside, what it also does is it creates an explosion of application. This is because not only are you going to the cloud for the infrastructure, but you're choosing among best of breed applications. And in the course of doing that, you basically are adding to the application environment within your particular organization. So you can have your on-premises applications and you can have your cloud applications. In fact, stated that most organizations have in the neighborhood of around 90 applications. So what does that mean from a business impact perspective? Well, fairly obviously, it's a statement of the obvious. With more applications, you're going to have more requests for integrations between applications as well as data. And that presents a problem because applications, as many of us know, have a varying degree of connectivity. Some applications have great connectivity, some don't. And in terms of being able to recognize different data sets or objects, it also varies among the particular connections or interfaces between applications. So basically, we have an environment where you have inconsistent connectivity across those applications. And then also, particularly for larger enterprises, and this is especially true, for example, with ERP applications. So as you go from one department to another, because of that inconsistent connectivity, you'll have a loss of insight as the data moves from departments. So as data moves, say, from your purchasing system into your ERP system, and perhaps from your ERP system into your customer relationship management system or your CRM system, you can have gaps in insight. It just creates a challenge for all of us to bring those environments together. And it is especially true if you have a multi-department organization. And so lastly, a lot of this falls on the IT organization to manage. And as we all know in current times, it's really a struggle to have additional resources, whether those resources are in terms of people or whether they're in terms of financial resources. So what does this translate to? So this translates to an environment that is represented by what you see in this picture. Most applications are disconnected. This leads to data silos, and then because you have data silos, you'll have delays in terms of how your data flows from one area of application to another, and this at the end of the day slows down or hampers your business results. So the pain, the friction, the delay that you see represented here by the brick wall just means the effort that you must take to try to bring those applications together. And if those applications are unable to come together, then you invoke manual processes to move the data along, and that leads to delay. So that's fairly straightforward in really understanding our environment or your environment. And so I want to say this is, again, what you see today in many organizations. And so as I look at your poll questions and your responses, I see many of you are IT engineers and developers, and some of you are business aligned, business management. So that's great. So we have a nice even representation of engineers or technical people as well as business people. And that basically means that I'm sure many of you are relating to the issues that I mentioned. And in terms of your poll results, what are your top challenges with data and application integration today? Voila, there you go. The number one answer is too many applications and slow integration, and too many tools to bring it together that are hard to use. So it looks that your actual experiences is right in line with what we're discussing today, and we're really happy that you're here to listen to us to present a better way. So what is that better way? That better way is with the SnapLogic Intelligent Integration Platform. What we have in SnapLogic basically is a central environment for you to manage all your integrations. And this would mean your application integration as well as your data integration. And primarily by having a central fabric for integration, or an iPaaS platform for short. iPaaS stands for Integrated Platform as a Service. You have the ability to now remove those barriers that we spoke about before. And then also, because we are a service, and I'm looking forward to seeing the live demo from our colleagues here at InterWorks later, you can see for yourself just how easy it is to use. The learning curve for SnapLogic is relatively short. Once you learn the basics of it, why you don't even need to be a developer to implement your integrations. Also, a benefit of the SnapLogic platform is because we have the ability to manage your application environment as well as your data environment from an integration perspective. You can basically create automated processes that go across multiple functions, or you can have perhaps automation within a particular vertical. Say, for example, if we're focusing on ERP, you can have an environment that moves from your data from SAP maybe to Coupa, and then perhaps if you need to bounce that information over to your CRM like Salesforce, you'll be able to do that very effectively through the SnapLogic environment. You establish or create your pipelines, establish your triggers, and off you go. So basically, you can create employee journeys, hire to retire, for example, customer journeys where you have a better understanding of all of the aspects of your customer, from how they engage with you on your corporate systems to how they perhaps buy products from you. And then ultimately, you can monitor data that might be in social media space, for example. So you can bring that all together very easily within the SnapLogic environment, and then maybe move it over to an analytics environment, a data warehouse in the cloud. It could be on AWS with Redshift, or it could be with SAP Cloud Analytics, or even with Snowflake. So you are able to construct these journeys, and these journeys are, as I mentioned before, easy to construct. You can be certainly an IT person to do this with a very short learning curve, but also you can be a business person that engage with this platform and not have to be specifically a developer. So that's a major advantage of SnapLogic in terms of its ease of use. Another advantage of the integration platform approach is that now you can consolidate your application and your data flows, and you can do that without having to engage multiple tools. And again, judging from your poll questions, many of you are struggling with the fact that you have too many applications, and therefore you have hard to use tools and too many tools. So with the SnapLogic approach, you can eliminate having a separate solution for API management. You can eliminate having a separate point-to-point integration tool to orchestrate your integrations, and just bring it all together in a common platform. So regardless of what your data source is, you can move it to some target area. So you're provided that high amount of flexibility. Now, within the SnapLogic environment, just a few speeds and feeds here. We have over 500 pre-built connectors that help you to orchestrate the environment, as I mentioned before. And then also we use artificial intelligence to help basically the pipeline building part of the integration. So our artificial intelligence specifically provides recommendations for you. So for example, based on all the metadata that we collect as a service, we have an idea that when you construct a pipeline, let's say you're going to start with a raw JSON file and you're going to move it into an analytics platform. If you pick the source destination for the JSON file, the likelihood is that we have an idea of how we're going to have to map that data or maybe transform that data, and our artificial intelligence will provide recommended steps. So every step along building that pipeline, you'll have recommendations based on our artificial intelligence capabilities. And we believe that we're unique in that regard to provide that type of power for you that develops a much easier to use environment. So there you have it at a high level in terms of why SnapLogic, and I like to now stop sharing my screen. With SnapLogic, you basically have a unified platform for all your integration needs, and you can deploy it as a service in the cloud, or you can have your own hosted environment behind your firewall. Will be able to reach into your data center and manage all of that from a central point. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it back over to Gochi. And again, I want to thank you for your time to listen to our story as it relates to SnapLogic and our integration platform as a service. So let me stop sharing my screen. All right, come on, buddy. Where are you? There you go. Thank you. All right, turning back over to you, Gochi.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. I'm not able to share the slide on my side again.
Okay.
Just quickly.
It's okay. These things happen.
Yeah, it's all Murphy laws. Okay. So thank you, Michael, for this thorough explanation. I would like to add to this that on today's demonstration, we will try to capture some of the challenges and the problems, and we will show how they can be effectively overcome using the SnapLogic platform. I'm sure that many of the audience will recognize these challenges in their organization, or will recognize challenges that will encounter going on the path of the digital transformation. In other words, we will present how InterWorks leveraging the SnapLogic contributed to the rapid and efficient upgrading of the client ERP systems by easily connecting its entities. So before handing over to Vlatko for the demonstration part, I would like to briefly give you a context by explaining our client story. The client's ERP system was old, with many legacy entities written in different languages and many different ways of communication channels. It had many outdated functionalities as well when we compare them with the today's out-of-the-box ERP solutions provided by SAP or Oracle. I would like to mention some of them, like difficulty and complicated process for adding and updating offers, or completely missing the customer resource system. To be honest, there were some processes for consolidating the customer data, but that hardly can be considered as a CRM. Furthermore, we had untimely analysis of the sales data, manual inserting and processing of the billing reports, and etc. So due its inefficiency, the ERP system became a burden on the company's growth, and our client management was on a crossroad with two options: whether to choose to completely replace the system, which in the best scenario would take many months to implement, or the other path was to proceed with the gradual upgrade by replacing its key segments on the system that are lagging at most. They chose option number 2, and what have they done is they purchased Salesforce to serve the CRM segment, and as well to serve the quote to cash flow in the later stages in the implementation. Snowflake was chosen for serving the data warehouse segment and became a centralized point for storing information and feeding the BI. And of course, to complete the puzzle, SnapLogic was chosen as the platform that will do all the heavy lifting and achieve this transition in the most efficient way. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over here to Vlatko to demonstrate the technical part. Vlatko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Goce. Pleased to see you all attending this webinar. And I want to divert your attention to the screen. Most of you are familiar with what charts like this, and based on your answers on the pool that we have done, most of you are coming in from a technical background. What you're seeing at the screen is a depiction of a real-life problem of a large enterprise organization where they have a pool of applications which are hosted behind a corporate firewall, and they have different pools of data lying around throughout their infrastructure. What you have here on your left side of the screen are operational databases that are hosting the data based on the number of customers that particular organization has. And that particular data is replicated nightly with a batch process to a replication server, which is used as a source of data for the integration portion of their effort. This includes data obfuscation and handling of personally identifiable data. And also they have a drive, hosted files, which are laying in on a drive, similarly hosted behind the corporate firewall. Building on that, their vendors or the clients which are purchasing services from there are communicating with SFTP hosted files. If you see that green circle in the middle, which denotes SnapLogic, it's the platform that is of choice because of the value that is giving the client based on the out-of-the-box connectors available and the ability to connect the different data sources without much effort. Now, let's switch to SnapLogic and let's see how actually we're going to build the solution. Let's see if you can hand over the share screen. Thank you. So you should be able to see my screen now. What we're seeing now is the designer portion of SnapLogic, and what is depicted is a so-called control pipeline. On your way to development and on your way of delivering solutions to enterprise clients, there is several points that we need to think about before designing the solution. First off, we should make sure that we utilize genericity, or the pipelines should be developed in the most generic way possible, meaning that you are to reuse a single pipeline for processing different entities if that is possible. The second thing to note is please develop pipelines which are self-repairing. The drive to have less and less personnel incorporated into maintaining these pipelines is cutting down costs, and it is beneficial to your client. And the third portion of, let's call it a pillar of good development in SnapLogic, is the pipeline should be as simple as possible. Now, if we take a look here, this is the control pipeline, and it has a centralized control, meaning that you can add assets that are going to be processed further down without having to develop multiple pipelines down the line for that particular asset. Let's take a look at the control file. And this is a very simple control file, which only depicts the assets that we are taking from that replication database that we saw on the slide before. It contains only a table name and whether this table should be processed further down the line. As you can see here, you have the table name with the schema, of course, because it is a database, and whether we should process that further down the line or not. This is something that you can choose to expand and make sure it incorporates everything that you want to have based on the problem that you're solving in your organization. That is simply parsed. It is a CSV format, but nothing stops you from using a different format. SnapLogic provides out-of-the-box parsers for different format types. And based on that true or false value, we are deciding whether we're going to process them and move them to our CRM system, which is Salesforce, or they will go to our data warehouse just as a table for data exploration, or they will be mapped to our staging area. Now, going forward and building on that generic pipeline design, we should make sure when we're building the pipelines that the assets that we're sending, the pipeline is able to process them in a parallel fashion. Now, in the interest of time, we're going to build one single atomic pipeline. That is the working part of the solution, which actually does the heavy lifting and connects to our systems. Let's create a new pipeline, which will be hosted in our project, Data Ingest. Let's call it a Salesforce worker. We have a naming convention here, which I will go into details later. Let's make sure that that pipeline has parameters based on which you will be able to process your entities. We are processing tables, so we need the table name. We are trying to achieve pipeline that is self-repairing, so we need to know the execution date. And we have multiple systems which are to be integrated, so we need to know which table in which system was placed. So we will have a pipeline parameter called system. Now, because Salesforce was chosen as a data warehouse, we have a control table which you're free to design it as you wish yourself. For the purposes of this presentation, we have a very simple design. The table is called execution log, contains the execution date, the table name, the load status, and the system in which we have loaded. Now, that is a table that is going to be used when we're trying to see whether a particular asset or entity was processed successfully. In order to do that, we need to make sure that those pipeline parameters that we've just created are mapped to fields. We're going to pull a mapper, which is a very neat snap, and we're going to map them to fields. The reason why we're doing that, and it will become a lot more clear in the second step, is because it is very easy to use very easy to use fields instead of pipeline parameters when you're writing SQL queries. Let's map them to a field. The $sign denotes that that is a field. Table name, execution date, and system. Next thing that we want is a Snowflake execute snap. That is a snap that will connect to Snowflake and it will execute a sample SQL code. We have chosen to go this way just so that we can achieve that generic approach. Otherwise, you have a list of snaps here which can do selects, etc., 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 without the need of you to write queries. Let's make sure that this mapper has his input view deleted. Once that is done, we need to make sure that we have an SQL code here that will check whether the particular table that we're trying to execute has executed successfully. Now, because this is Salesforce and in the interest of time, I'm gonna copy our SQL code and place it here. Now this, once we validate and execute, should give us the output of the tables that have been processed but haven't been processed successfully. If we can see that at the moment, because this is an empty table and we haven't run the solution, we don't have an output, but we have the original which is coming in from the parent pipeline. Now, so that we can simulate the behavior of the parent pipeline, let's copy some of the table names that we want to use before making sure that this is run. So we're gonna use account as this is going to go to Salesforce. We're gonna place it as a pipeline parameter here. And this is only to make sure that we have a parameter that we can use to see output data. Let's make sure that we have time and that we have stated a system, which is going to be Salesforce. That is our CRM system to which the data is directed. Now, the next thing that we want to do while building the pipeline is pull the data from the replication database where the actual entity has been replicated and conformed to Snowflake standards. So for the purposes of this presentation, that is a MySQL database. I'm going to take a MySQL select, which we're going to give an input view to link on the output of this snap. And once this is done, we're going to validate the data. So that we have an output, and we'll see how to configure the MySQL select snap. It will fail, of course, because we haven't made the proper configuration yet. There it is, it's the output. Now, what we want to have here is a dynamic way of supplying the entity name. For that, we want to press the equal sign, which will convert this particular field into expression builder field. And then we're going to select the pipeline parameter that is coming in from the parent, for this particular case, the account. And that's that. We have set up a pool of data for that particular object, and we're going to run them after we demonstrate the creation of this pipeline to see how that happens for each and every individual object. There we go. We have the output of that particular object. Let's take a look at it. There we go. Now, let's make sure that we map that and clean up any unneeded data. I'm going to place a mapper here. And we're going to make sure that the original is no longer fed forward because we don't have structures that can house the original portion. So original will be left blank and deleted from the source path. We're going to make sure that we move the root, which is all of these fields that are supposed to go to Salesforce. There we go. And then we're going to come back to this mapper after I place the Salesforce upsert snap, which is the snap that SnapLogic provides and makes all of this, what we're doing, possible. Let's take the Salesforce upsert snap. There it is. And let's go and configure that. Now, in order to use a generic pipeline approach, you need to have your target systems made ready for that. The Salesforce upsert snap does upserts and updates and inserts defined on a ID that is supplied by Salesforce. So if that particular ID exists in the input data, that particular record in Salesforce is updated. If it doesn't exist, a new record is inserted. You need to select an external ID field, and when doing the architecture of the solution, you need to have the same naming convention and the same name for the external ID field across all of your Salesforce entities, which at this particular case is external ID _ C. And the next thing that we want to do is make sure that the Salesforce upsert snap has a dynamic way of getting the name of the object that we're gonna perform the operation on. So again, press the equal sign, which will convert the text field into an expression builder field. We're gonna take the table name, and we're gonna do a little bit of JavaScript gymnastics here to make sure that we get only the account name, which is, again, very easy and very straightforward. We want to split the table name value on an underscore, which is a function. Split is a function that is going to return an array of strings. And after that, we want to make sure that we have the last string based on the naming convention that is used in our data replication engine. So we're going to take the length of this -1. And because of the case sensitivity of certain systems, like Snowflake for instance, we want to make sure that we want to capitalize the value of that. You have a neat option here on your right, where there is a box that contains all of the functions that you can use. Now, because we are working with strings, let's find the string class. There it is, and there's our capitalize function. Press on it, and you're going to get the capitalize here. There we go. That should work. Let's save this. And now let's go into the mapper, where I've said that we're going to come back to. Now, we've said that we need an external ID field, and that is a field that we want to generate ourselves, either in our source system or within SnapLogic. So we have the option of having the field here, which would be snapping total count. For the purposes of the presentation, we don't have the luxury of generating the field that will be unique for every single record, but this will demonstrate the easiness with which you can actually update records there. And then you need to make sure that this field here is named exactly the same as your external ID field. We can copy that and place it in our mapper, and we're good to go. One additional item is the system that we've supplied, which we no longer need, and we can delete it from the source path. We can do that just by leaving this field blank. And there you go. You have created one single working pipeline in less than 20 minutes, not including my explanation, that can pull data from a data source behind your corporate firewall, process that data, and load it into Salesforce. And what is to stress here is that the way this pipeline is designed enables you to have that generic approach where for different item, you can have a different data types and different values. Now, one thing to add here, and in the interest of time, because we're moving towards the end, I'm going to switch to an already pre-built pipeline so that I can explain the actual logging and the error handling of the pipeline. Let's take a look here, which is a pre-built pipeline, and it looks very similar towards this portion here. And what we have here is a way of generic handling of errors so that you can have that self-repair functionality that SnapLogic offers because of the way the architecture is designed. If one of your assets errors out, this particular snap will generate an error to the parent pipeline or the control pipeline that we've just seen before. Now, this particular solution that we're presenting, before I go back to the error pipeline, on this slide that was presented before is our direction from our replicated data to Salesforce. We have several more that are going in from our operational databases and from our hosted files. Let's go back to our Salesforce pipeline. Now, we have the Salesforce app cert. Let me validate this real quick so that you can see the data. When the Salesforce app cert pipeline gives us an error, it will go to our error view, to the union, and it will output to our control pipeline here. This is the control pipeline, and this atomic working pipeline is called by the pipeline execute snap here with parameters which are passed from our centralized control. Now, let's take a look at the error. Now, on purpose, we have one entity that doesn't exist in our Salesforce instance, which should correspond to a CRM system. And we see that the Salesforce upsert snap has failed. Now, that failure will be handled by the logic here, and it will be placed into an ETL error table, again, within Snowflake. But if the error is not of a system or an infrastructure nature, meaning that something happened with your data center and connectivity is no longer obtainable, or something happened with the infrastructure, things that are not data related, then you need someone to have and take a look at what is going on. The approach that we're trying to demonstrate here today enables you every data errors that happened during your load to be reprocessed without human intervention again, if it is not needed. This is the control pipeline is a pipeline that is scheduled, and it works every 5 minutes, checking and rechecking whether the load has been completed successfully. Now, if the load has been completed successfully, nothing happens. If certain tables were not completed successfully, as we can see into the data here, let's open the execution log table, sorry. Let's run this and validate so that we can see that. If certain tables were not completed successfully, then you will have error logs in your error tables. So on the next execution, the process will be prompted again. It will check which tables failed, and it will reprocess them again. Now, leveraging the SnapLogic upstart snap, you will be able to run that process as many times as you want during a particular day, making sure that this connection here is established, And that if a data error is in question, meaning that someone in the departments forgot to input the data for the day, once that data is available, the bulk upsert snap will make sure that you have that in your data warehouse, in your CRM system, Salesforce, and everywhere else where the solution at hand is placing that particular data. Another thing to note is the way that notifications are handled with this, making sure that everyone in question that is related to that particular load, because many enterprise companies have warehouses which they're using as their single source of truth, and in their reporting, day-to-day reporting, do not have the luxury of waiting for those reports. So if you take a look, you can have your support team notified at all of the time regarding what happens with the load in question. Now, we're going to wait a little bit more so that this finishes. And once it finishes, we're going to take a look at the parallel processing that happens here for the different entities. There it is, it finished. For the different entities enables us to have all of the tables or all of the entities that we're trying to process processed, and those that failed are going to be reprocessed to the next execution. So, and because of the load, self-repairing is completely decoupled from making sure that something stays in a synchronous way of execution. Let's take a look at just a brief look at how and why we have set up these snaps. This is a simple bulk load that populates our util error. All of the errors which are generated by the different processes here. So we have the process that loads to Salesforce with this atomic pipeline, which is a little bit more expanded than what we have already built here. It has 2 more snaps so that you can handle the error, which is something that you can, but you don't need to have regarding on your company level or your way of work. And it will make sure that it collects all of the errors, they're placed into the warehouse, and proper notifications are sent to the person that needs to see them. And for all of the correct entities that have been loaded, this is the branch that will do the logging, and most of them are manually hard-coded at the moment because this is the topmost control. Now, having said that, and in the interest of time, I'm going to stop my presentation here and revert back to Renata for questions. I'm sure there will be plenty of questions. Renata, you can take over.
Hi, everyone. So now we're open for questions. If anyone has a question, you can feel free to address it to someone in specifically if you want, or it can be a general open question so that anyone that feels comfortable can answer it. Thank you.
Great demo, glad to see how.
Thank you.
I see that we have a question. Sorry, Michael. I see that we have a question. What is an average implementation time from small scale to large scale projects?
So Michael, do you want me to take this one?
Yes, please do.
Yes.
So the answer to this, it would be depends. It depends on the infrastructure that you're trying to integrate, or the infrastructure that you're trying to implement in an integration solution. But as you've seen, it is very easy to pull data from various sources and to place it to various sources and to make modifications to it. So if we define a large client as a client who has several hundreds of thousands users per day, then the average implementation for that involves all of their systems, let's say telecommunications, would be 6 to 9 months, which is very, very small amount of time. And for users that do not go into that domain of numbers, the implementation times are a month or less than a month.
Thank you, Vlatko. We have another question. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, so no problem. I wasn't sure if you were going to read the next set of questions, but how does error handling work on the control pipeline that you just shown, Vlad?
Oh, and let me reshare. So the design is made that we don't use the error handling that SnapLogic offers out of the box, or an error pipeline that you can use on a pipeline level. Now, there are several reasons for that. First, you want to make sure that you have control on your errors. You want to make sure that you conform the errors to a certain standard. And when it comes to notifications, you want to be able to control the way notifications are sent out to your prospective clients. Now, in this particular example, all of the errors are siphoned with this union and then are processed. Because we have several pipeline execute snaps, all of them are a possible error generator. So we want to make sure that we have everything collected to a single place and then process them individually. That happens with the union and then with the mapping of the error assets that are of interest to the people that are going to be troubleshooting that particular error if it comes to that. But the backbone of this is actually the working pipeline. The working pipeline is made in an atomic fashion that it's kept as simple as possible, and it has been given the permission to error out and fail the actual execution. Because when you have a pipeline that handles the errors on your pipeline level, like this here, that will change the default execution of a pipeline. So if we go back to the control, once an error is generated, we make sure that we log that error in our ETL error table, which is on Snowflake. There it is. And I have generated quite a bit of errors. There we go. Depending on what happens, you have all of the information here. Another thing to note is that SnapLogic keeps their logs for 3 months. So whatever you can see in their dashboard will be available in the next 3 months. If you do not log your error somewhere, after that period of time, you will no longer be able to access it in case you need to troubleshoot that further. Once that is logged, we make sure that we send an email with the error details. Now, this is, again, it is a very simple thing that you can configure. It's an email sender snap with an SMTP account. I will not edit the account at the moment, just so that we don't show credentials. And once that email is sent, again, the output of all the snaps is collected. It is joined so that we make sure that all of the executions of the subsequent pipelines, which are going in parallel with the pipeline that they're out, are completed. And once they're completed, we check whether an error has been generated in the root. If an error has been generated in the root, then we log the main execution. We make sure that the domain load has failed, because that is something on which the scheduled load here checks to see whether it should start again today. And then we send another mail. This can be sent to a different set of recipients here, depending again on your clients, that the main load has failed. If an error has not been detected, then the execution continues through this branch, and we are just logging a successful execution with a notification that the load has completed successfully. And if you're in the US and are trying to integrate your enterprise corporation, especially if you're a public corporation with all of the SOX regulations, proper notifications and proper error handling is something that you must have in your integrations. I hope that this answers the question.
That was great. That was a very extensive answer and very thorough. Thank you very much, Vlad.
Thank you, Vladimir. We have another question. I assume that this one might be addressed to you, Vlatko, again. What are the advantages of SnapLogic versus integration based on a modern microservices approach?
It's an interesting question. And I think it's a blend between SnapLogic and the microservices approach, because first and foremost, most of the advantages that SnapLogic offers is creating value for a very fast amount of time. So a very short amount of time, you can create value and you can have your product on the market. If we take a look at the options that SnapLogic offers, the fact that you can offer your integrations as a microservices to the vendor, then I'd say that SnapLogic incorporates the modern microservices approach also. That is not something that we've demonstrated in this presentation, but it is very easy and it is very fast to expose this particular pipeline as a microservice and to give permission to users within your enterprise organization to call that particular microservice either to retrieve data or to perform some type of actions. So I wouldn't say that SnapLogic lacks anything that the microservice integration, modern microservice integration approach gives us.
Thank you. We have another question. If we choose to use the SnapLogic platform, will you be able to provide us guidance, or do you only offer implementation solutions? Both, I think that you can take this one.
Yeah, so on the contrary, besides that we are implementation partners, we are also training partners with SnapLogic. So we strongly believe in knowledge and education. Our team is 100% certified, and also to answer the question, we have also prepared a training program that we followed and provide to the SnapLogic customers as well. I hope that's the answer that you're looking for.
Come on, guys, if you have any other questions, we're still open. We have 4 minutes left.
Yeah, great questions. We'd love to hear more if you have other thoughts. Otherwise, we can move to wrap up, give folks a few minutes back in their day. That's not a bad thing.
Sounds nice. Okay, we have a question. Which resources, books, or online would you recommend for SnapLogic design patterns such as ETL?
I tell you what, I'll take that one. We have a couple of sources online. You go to our website, we have a community which will provide a collection of snaps that have already been created by individuals like yourselves, customers and partners, and you will have access to those snaps. And then lastly, we have a catalog that also is provided through our community. So I would invite you to go to the SnapLogic website, log in or join our community and take advantage of the resources that are there. So we have a catalog full of pipelines that you can use as references to build or create your own pipeline. So that's how I would approach that.
Thank you, Michael. Any other questions?
Well, it's great. Again, Vlad, that was an awesome demo. Very thorough, very detailed, and it was great for a virtual hands-on lab to see that quality of information. So great job.
Thank you everyone for sparing your time to be with us. We hope that this was useful, and we hope to see you again on another webinar. So I'm saying goodbye, and I will hand it over to the other speakers so they can wrap up the webinar.
Sure. Thank you for joining, taking an hour out of your day, and everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.